It's time for Stockton Alive, and here's your one host. Maybe he might have to suit up for the Golden State Warriors in the next game. The one and only Nate Knott.
Well, here we are at the beginning of our third season on the air. We've passed 2 years on the air. Once we hit May 2019, and now it's June. And this is show number 31. So anyway, with those important milestones marked, and the fact that I walked here today and the fact that it's 90 plus degrees, I have my RTD 50th anniversary Hawaiian transit shirt on today, which is Stockton, by the way. I've got Burns Tower on here, RTD buses, the facade of the Stockton ballpark, the Cineplex Dome, and a bunch of other things on this shirt, along with some palm trees and things. So we're ready to go. We've got all the tools we need here. We've got our tools of ignorance, our red and black pen, our whiteout, our old-fashioned yellow legal pad, and in case we need it, the World Almanac has reappeared on our studio.
From
I don't think we'll need
2017.
it, but in case we do. So what I was going to talk about today is the good and bad of downtown development. As you know, and the listeners are probably tired of hearing this, we've talked about all the different new businesses that have sprung up in Stockton, especially restaurants, pubs, lounges, but now we've got the buildings coming in where people are going to be living there. That's actually going to start happening in the next few weeks, and people are going to start moving into these buildings. And they should be, these four buildings, I should say, should all hit near full occupancy somewhere around mid to late August. But they're going to be largely populated during the month of July. So we're going to have new people living on the streets of downtown Stockton, living in buildings located where they can be walking on the streets of downtown Stockton. And these are market rate housing, so these people are going to be people with jobs and income, and will be able to go out to restaurants and places and spend money, and little boutiques and things are probably going to pop up. However, we're not going to name them all today like we've done a couple different times. That's not the intent. The intent is to talk about the good and bad of gentrification. Now, for those that aren't familiar with the term, gentrification is when you take an old rundown area, and it's often warehouses or industrial, and suddenly it becomes a trendy place for people to put in shops and boutiques. Of course, what happens when that happens is the property values in the buildings skyrocket in value, and if you had an old residential hotel that was doing low-income housing for people on fixed income, suddenly it becomes remodeled, spruced up, trendy, and becomes a bed and breakfast inn or a touristy place, and suddenly the prices are much higher to be in there. That's what gentrification is. And the reason I bring this up is we're going to see this start to happen in Stockton. But I was in Sacramento on Friday, and I'm going to make some parallels between Stockton and Sacramento and talking about gentrification. Downtown Sacramento has been a work in progress for many years. They've had two false starts in downtown Sacramento that did not take hold. In the mid to late 70s, they put in a thing called the K Street Mall. They took out automobiles, put in pedestrian sidewalks and pathways. And I don't know what these people were thinking of when they did this. And several cities did this, but most notably Sacramento and Fresno. Sacramento's was the K Street Mall, and Fresno's was the Fulton Street Mall. But in both of them, they're almost identical. I don't know how many times, if you've ever seen this, Dustin, but you see an old artist rendering of something from the 1960s or 70s, and inevitably the buildings or the sidewalks or the benches are made of cold concrete, unpainted. But they somehow make it look good in the artist's conception of the building or the design of the plaza or whatever. And they also, for some reason, love geometrical triangular squares and rectangles and circles, too. So when they built the K Street Mall in Sacramento in the early 70s, took the automobiles off, which generally I'd be in favor of. They built it mostly of cold, unpainted concrete, and they put some of these areas had grass and some had water fountains. And I wouldn't say great water fountains. I'd say running water might be a better example, with what looked like yard sprinklers popping up in the air. But it was all cold, gray, unpainted cement. And then there was these triangular shapes that would make the benches or the water pools, or rectangular or circular. But instead of looking attractive and welcoming to people, have you ever, I have a question for you. When you see it on a hot day in the afternoon and the sun's been shining, do you want to sit down on a cement bench?
No.
No. Now, cold metal wouldn't be great either, I admit, because metal, but concrete is just not something that people generally want to sit down on and relax on. It just doesn't invite you to do that. Plus, concrete is hot or it's cold. Now again, metal can be too, but if it's textured metal with paint, that's a different story. And you can coat it with different things to mitigate that. But concrete's concrete. And sometimes it's cement. You take your pick. But it's also very hard. There's nothing soft or inviting about concrete or cement. So the K Street Mall in Sacramento was ugly, and it failed miserably. So in the late 70s, they decided to take, and this was Jerry Brown, the governor, the first time he was governor in his first 8 years, with the Secretary of Transportation named Adriana Gianturco. They took, and this was actually a good thing now I'm going to talk about, but when it comes to the K Street Mall, it didn't really work. But the overall impact of what I'm going to talk about was good. They took highway funds designed to build a third freeway that would have crisscrossed through Sacramento, through downtown Sacramento. Instead of building a third freeway to add to Business 80 and I-80 that were already there, and 99 and what they call the Western Express, they built light rail. And this was done from 86 to 89. And they put light rail through the K Street Mall, thinking that having having light rail, which was similar to streetcars and the old rail vehicles of the old days, would bring pedestrians to downtown. They'd start shopping. But it took them 3 years to build it. And while they were building it, a lot of the businesses couldn't make it through the transition of the construction. Now, the other thing you have a challenge today, not 40 years ago, or I'm sorry, not 60 or 70 years ago when streetcars were common, but now today, people don't necessarily want to go shopping to a place and have to carry all the stuff with them. They've grown up and are accustomed to putting things in the trunk of their car and going from place to place. Whereas in the old days, when people rode streetcars and things, they generally ordered things to be delivered. Home delivery used to be a big deal when labor was much cheaper and customer service was a big thing. Now, of course, that's gone full circle because that's what Amazon does. You order through Amazon, they deliver it. But of course, it's a different era, and technologically, this is all done differently. And the shipping costs today are much cheaper. So, anyway, I want to point out that I'm going to give you some examples of Sacramento gentrification. Only now it's becoming successful again. And the reason I'm talking about this is Sacramento built the Golden One Center downtown.
I'll be going there next Tuesday.
Yeah, and I haven't been to a game there, but I've been on a tour of it, and I've been in the VIP lounges and everything, so I know exactly what it looks like. It's a terrific arena.
I'm gonna go see wrestling there next.
There you go.
Next Tuesday night.
And one of the incredibly outstanding features of the Golden One Center is they actually have large, huge, movable windows. They can open windows and let fresh air in that arena. And in case you didn't know, this arena is also neutral on energy. It is net neutral on energy. Out in the outskirts of Sacramento, they built a solar farm. And the solar farm is either owned by or contracted by the Sacramento Kings. And the solar farm produces about 80% of the electricity needed to run the Golden One Center. The other 20% they produce at the Golden One Center itself through more solar panels, recycling, and some other things. And so the Golden One Center does not have to suck up any PG&E power, essentially. And so it's considered a green arena. Now, if you've never been there, and I assume you've probably been by it at least on the outside.
I've taken a tour like you myself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you've seen the green shrubs and things.
Yeah.
So I've also mitigated the reflective heat that would come off of it.
The interesting thing about that is, like, when you walk around Golden One Center, there's, like, cameras and security everywhere. Like, you can't even, like, somebody tries to, like, drink or even, like, smoke outside there, they'll be on you right away because it's, like, no smoking zone either outside of Golden One Center. So
that's true.
It's, highly security over there.
And that's generally a good thing for the most part. And then with all the shrubs and greenery, it has this little bit of scenery about it. It's not just an edifice or a structure. And then apparently this reduces the heat reflecting off the building. But some heat is also designed to reflect off the building because you notice the color, changes colors. It has multiple panels of special textured metal that goes to gold and silver and all kinds of colors.
It's different than, like, the Arizona Cardinals kind of have this, where they actually, like, they can like take their field out and it could get solar
Right.
powered by the grass,
Right.
by the sun, and then it goes back in.
Yeah, that's one thing I love about the Cardinals. They
Yeah.
actually they have a dome stadium, but they don't have AstroTurf or any kind of tartan turf or any kind of prescription turf. They actually have a huge rectangular square filled with soil and grass and made a lawn, and it rolls in and out on railroad tracks. And they actually let the grass sit out in the sun.
I didn't know it was railroad tracks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's
on railroad
interesting.
tracks. They just
Yeah.
slide it in and out, and so I guess about 2/3 of the time the stadium's arena is not being used. The grass is sitting outside in the nice natural outdoors, getting a nice suntan and growing green and everything else. So anyway, I mentioned the Golden One Center because I want to make sure everyone understands that I like the Golden One Center. It kept the Sacramento Kings in town, and I think it's been a great stimulus for downtown. Now, what it did do is it created a huge burst of investment in downtown Sacramento, which is where we get that gentrification thing from. Now, there's good and bad in this. Old downtown Sacramento had not really amounted to a whole lot for a long time. They built a thing called the Capitol Mall, which is based on Albany, New York, by the way. And they built in front of the Capitol building. They built a long, huge stretch of green parkway, but again, it's kind of rectangular and square curbs around the grass. And then they built office buildings that stretched the width of the park. But they were square, rectangular, kind of ugly buildings. But anyway, that was the way things were in the 60s. Of course, as we know in Stockton, a similar type of architecture for that is our old county courthouse. That's got that kind of square, rectangular, cold concrete, unpainted look that was so prevalent in the 60s. But anyway, the Golden One Center is the third attempt at revitalizing that part of Old Sacramento, which is on the end of the K Street Mall. So what we're going to say here, you had a shopping center built there in the early 70s, but it was kind of an ugly, almost a glorified strip mall, and it failed as a retail center and turned into a little bit of a kind of a private trade school college thing. Then, after that really didn't work, they went in and tried the mall concept again, and they built a huge, relatively nice-looking two-story mall called the Westfield Mall. Westfield was a chain of malls, and they had a Disney shop in there, and they had a Cineplex, and the Cineplex I believe is still there. I think it's the only thing left from that mall. And they had 2 levels of about 50 shops, and they were upscale shops, and it did well for a while. I still don't know quite exactly why it totally failed, but finally, after 10 years, it started going downhill. Next thing you know, one day you wake up and half the place is vacant. Even with the double-decked terraces and gardens and water fountains and everything else that they had there. They had a big Macy's store there and a Penny's and some other things. So the first retail mall failed because it was ugly ugly architecturally, kind of an ugly subterranean thing without many windows. Turned into a little college, and then that kind of faded away. Then they built Westfield Mall. Now Westfield Mall, in addition to having all the major chain stores, had some microbreweries, and it also had the theaters I mentioned, had a Disney store, and it had a Hard Rock Cafe. And yet with all that, it still ultimately failed over a period of about 10 or 12 years. So now they build the Golden One Center. Well, this one seemed to have struck gold because everything that's going around it now is major investment of a very high-end scale. There's also, I don't know if you ever noticed, there's a huge tower. I think it's called the Renaissance Tower in downtown Sacramento, like 2 blocks south of the Golden One Center. And the Golden One Center, by the way, was built in the area there used to be a subterranean underpass that went underneath a bank building or something like that. And that's where the Golden One Center actually sits right now, and about where the Macy's store used to be.
Yeah, they still use the Macy's parking lot area.
Yeah, okay. But now it's coming with all these upscale things. So I'm going to tell you now the good and the bad of the upscale. Now, first of all, it's good to have upscale. You need upscale. Any urban center that's going to be anything has to have expensive upscale and expensive parking. That's all part of vital urban center. That's just the way they are. That's the way San Francisco is. That's the way New York is. That's the way Chicago is in most parts. Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. That's just what comes with a vibrant urban center because space is very valuable in an urban center that means something. You have to squeeze a lot of people in a small area. So all the individual feet and square feet and inches and all it becomes very expensive. So here's where I'm going with this. You've got some incredibly beautiful upscale restaurants, pubs, and lounges. And some office buildings have been rebuilt that look really nice. And then there's this new building called the Renaissance Tower a couple blocks away. And most of what went away are marginal little businesses that really weren't making it. In some areas, just homeless encampments. And other areas were just flat out old buildings that were vacant. However, in every gentrification, there's a couple true honest to goods victims. And I'm going to give you a couple of the victims in Sacramento, because probably something like this we're probably going to wake up in a couple of years in Stockton. We'll probably lose one or two things that we wish we hadn't lost because of the increase in the values of the land and the upscale urban activity, which, as I said, is generally what you need and generally a bonus. But it just so happens that one of my favorite places in downtown Sacramento on 9th Street is called the Capitol Park Cafe. Now, I don't know if you're younger than I am by quite a bit and a couple generations behind me, but can you picture what a downtown cafe is supposed to look like? A diner? A downtown one.
Well, of course, a diner. Like you have you walk up these little stools you can sit.
Yeah,
on.
the counter and the stools. Yes,
Yeah,
and then you have many of them had old-fashioned booths with high backs.
Yeah.
Some even had coat hooks on them.
Yeah.
Well, you got that in the Capitol Park Cafe. It's got this nice long counter with all these little stools, and they're also super traditional. The tables are always set with coffee cups and saucers, whether anybody's there or not. So when you walk in, you see where everyone would sit because you see a coffee cup and a saucer there and silverware. So anyway, I ate there. And I was thinking, I was so happy that it was there because they have breakfast and lunch. They're not open for dinner anymore, but they have breakfast and lunch. And I'm just going to tell you what they had. I was so astounded at what they were offering for the price. I even photographed their menu. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to bring that up today. One day in the not too distant future, we're going to start popping up stuff on the computer screen when we talk about it so you can visualize what we're saying. But anyway, I ordered, after looking at the menu and deciding I would have loved to have eaten just about anything on that menu. And by the way, they serve breakfast and lunch the whole time. They're open, I want to say, 6 a.m. to 3 p.m., 7 days a week. It is located on 9th Street, right near this is a half a block from the State Capitol building, by the way, where this is. It's part of a complex of a hotel and ground level shops that was completely remodeled and beautified somewhere in the late 80s. At that time, I think these businesses were then considered upscale and pretty urban trendy. But now here we are 30-something years later, and they've kind of downgraded to working class. Still very nice to look at, but something like working class. So the complex I'm talking about, where the Capitol Park Cafe is, has as its centerpiece the Capitol Park Hotel, which at one time used to have a beautiful, open, high-ceiling, kind of an atrium lobby with wood-carved balconies and everything. But that, unfortunately, got kind of dumbed down over the years. But off to the side, they built a beautiful little small lobby, which is beautifully decorated with nice, fancy, striped wallpaper and potted plants and things. But where the lobby of this hotel used to be, with the wraparound balcony and everything, is now the Capitol Park Buffet. And they have a spectacular soup and salad buffet, all you can eat, with great heaps of fresh fruit and everything you could possibly imagine. Next to that is the Capitol Park Cafe Diner, which is where I ate. And what I ordered was a BLT sandwich, which came with, there was a traditional BLT sandwich on traditional sized bread. I got it toasted wheat bread. So there you are with, lettuce, tomatoes, not onions, but lettuce, tomatoes, mayonnaise, bacon, and all that. And French fries. And the price is $5.95. I still can't get over that. And so they even had a cheese sandwich available for $3.95. The last time I saw anything at all like that was Denny's used to have a grilled cheese sandwich for $1.99 back in the early 80s. So I get this $5.95 sandwich, which is great. And it's coming, and I'm just having ice water at this point. I'd already had too much coffee that day. I look over and I see the milkshake machine. I said, "Do you folks still have milkshakes?" "Oh, of course we do." I said, "Do you have strawberry?" "Of course we do." So I ordered a strawberry milkshake. Want to take a shot at the price on that, Dustin? This is real ice cream now, real hand-packed ice cream. And cream.
$3?
$3.95 is all they were charging. For about $2 less than you can get a frosty version at a typical drive-in or a McDonald's or a Wendy's or something. Actually, Wendy's little frozen dairy thing for I think $1.99 is excellent. But I'm talking about a true milkshake now. $3.95. I couldn't believe it. But it gets better than that. And they served it with the traditional wonderful glass, the old fashioned glass that comes up like a big flower arrangement glass.
Long spoon and
Yeah, the long spoon and straws and everything. But here they did what was the ultimate with the way milkshakes are supposed to be done. They gave you the tin that it was mixed in. Oh, and of course they sprayed whipped cream on the top. Well, I sucked down that milkshake, and I was by that time between the sandwich and milkshake, I'm pretty full. I look in the tin; it's half full. It filled up my glass a second time, so I actually had 2 milkshakes, effectively speaking, for 3 real hand-packed ice cream with mixed with real cream on a real milkshake mixer machine with whipped cream for $3.95. The whole meal, including tax. For French fries, a BLT, and a really superb, spectacular, large, extra large milkshake was $10.77. I just was beside myself. I actually left a $5 tip because I just was. But here's the point. This is why I did this whole rambling story about gentrification and this incredible place.
what's the place called again?
Well, it's called the Capitol Park
Cafe?
and then next to it's the Capitol Park Buffet, which I mentioned. You were out for just a moment that they had a whole other thing that used to be in what used to be the lobby of this hotel, which is the Capitol Park Hotel, by the way. This was all a big urban renewal thing done in the '80s at one time, and it's made to look like it's decorated to look like the 1880s. By the way, the exterior of the hotel and these buildings are all affiliated as one building. Anyway, then next to the Capitol Park Hotel. Oh, and I was going to say the buffet is located in what used to be a huge, beautiful lobby of the rest of the hotel. The hotel lobby now is something they made up later on with a smaller room and some potted plants. But so you have the Capitol Park Hotel, the Capitol Park Buffet. Then you have the Capitol Park Cafe, and the cafe is open 7 days a week. Then next to it, attached to it, and with an adjoining door, swinging door, is the Henry's Lounge. And this is your typical old-fashioned bar with the long bar, the stools, the pool table, all the neon signs of all the beer signs, all the goofy posters up on the wall with the sayings like free beer tomorrow and, well, one I can't say. I was about to say it, I realized I can't say it. This is a family show.
Yeah.
But anyway, this place is just oozing and dripping with personality. And probably some 1960 odors, too. But basically, and of course, the drinks are very generous and they're very inexpensive. And this is all in one integrated unit. But I found out that they're going to have, almost without warning, the owner of the building sold everything. And they're all going to be vacating. And they don't even know when. They think September, maybe November. But they think they might surprisingly be kicked out in late July. So there's one of the victims and sad things about gentrification. There's always the small business that has succeeded with the charm and the personality and the goodness and the incredibly frugal prices that the everyday person can afford, and we're probably going to lose them. And what's going to wind up there is probably some trendy place charging 4 times the prices for half the food. But that's you have to have the upscale stuff in downtown, though. So I mentioned this because this is becoming an issue with downtown Stockton. I'm talking about Sacramento, but this is happening in downtown Stockton. Except there's one major difference. Oh, if you look at the last 10 years, there weren't many businesses or small businesses to lose in downtown Stockton. I can only name about 5 or 6 that may lose out because of gentrification. Of course, what it will do is it will also prevent other people who might have opened kind of a little mom and pop store. Now, I think in Stockton, though, we don't have something like the Golden One Center downtown Stockton. So we don't quite have that kind of economic pressure. But anyway, so you got the good and bad of bringing back an urban area is the gentrification issue. But I'll tell you what, though. If you look at Stockton over the last 40 years, and you look at the status quo versus something new, and you look at the possibility of losing, sadly, because my wife and I once had a little business in downtown, and we would have probably been victims of something like this. And if we'd have just got the thing on its feet after many years of struggling and then had to lose it because the valuation went up, that'd be a kind of a bitter pill to swallow. But in any event, you have to have it, though. So there you go. Now, another thing I'll talk about, we talk about events coming up here all the time. I'm not going to do that, a lot of that tonight, but I'm going to talk about a couple things. First of all, have you ever been to a classic movie at the Bob Hope Theater?
I haven't. I've always wanted to go.
But of course, it's really the Fox California
Yeah.
Theater. But the money that went into it helped rename it to Bob Hope, and that's another one of those trade-offs you have to take. If you're going to take a glamorous, elegant, but rundown theater, and you have a choice of saving it or not saving it, and you can bring it back to full elegance by giving up the name, I guess it's worth giving up the name. But anyway, an organization called the Friends of the Fox Theater does a classic movie there once a month. It's on Sunday afternoons now, and part of the reason, there's two reasons it's on Sunday afternoons, and this hasn't been real good for them, actually. They used to be Friday nights. But the reason they're on Sunday afternoons is SMG, the development company that runs it, needs the weekend nights for the big shows and the big money and to draw the big crowds. So they really can't give up most Fridays or Saturday nights to a classic movie that's going to draw 300 or 400 or 500 people. I lose a lot of a sold-out show like George Lopez or something. So that's one reason. Then the other reason, and this is kind of not so good, and I have to look in the mirror when I say this, the predominant crowd that goes to most of the classic theaters at the Bob Hope Fox Theater are senior citizens. And it got to a point, even though they shouldn't feel this way, and even though we all talk about this all the time, downtown Stockton is actually very safe. Not only in reality, but statistically it's one of the safest places in all of San Joaquin County by crime rate. But it looks a little lonely and a little desolate, and you see a few panhandlers here and there, and you get one or two nutty people walking down the street that scream and yell at the top of their lungs, and that scares the heck out of senior citizens, as you can understand. And they're also concerned about the fact they have to park in a parking garage 2 blocks away, or maybe can't get street parking, which to a younger person isn't nearly as big a deal as it is to a senior citizen. So for all these reasons, they went from Friday nights to Sunday afternoons. The reason I bring this up is because when they went from Friday nights to Sunday afternoons, the classic movies at the Bob Hope Theater went from an average attendance of 500 or 600 per showing to about 200. And they're getting to it's getting to be a bit of a problem for them to continue to be able to do this, because they have to put a flat set of money down just to open up the theater. And it's all run by volunteers. They do operate the pipe organ, but it takes a staff of 5 people 3 hours at a cost of almost $1,000, I think, to raise and lower the pipe organ for it to be used. But that's one of the attractions of going to the Bob Hope for a movie, is to hear the pipe organ, since there aren't very many pipe organs around that you get a chance to listen to. And the organist always plays music that's related to the movie to a large extent. In fact, for example, we saw the Beatles movie Hard Day's Night there. And obviously the guy played a lot of Beatles music on the pipe organ. But anyway, so I mentioned this because this Sunday I went to the classic movie at the Bob Hope. And they were showing a spectacular movie. Now, it's a bit old, but that's why it's a classic. And it is in color. By the way, this was VistaVision. I'm sorry. It was a CinemaScope. People today just take this for granted that movies are always these extra large, wide movies. But movies used to have a square screen, just like television used to have small screens. And sometimes when you see a classic movie at the Bob Hope, it's actually more of a square screening that's in the middle 2/3 of the screen. But the movie I saw was The Magnificent Seven, with one of the greatest soundtracks ever, one of the greatest theme songs of a movie ever. For years, Marlboro used that song for their TV commercials when you could still put TV commercials about cigarettes on television. By the way, the last TV commercial with a cigarette was aired at 11:59 p.m. on December 31st, 1971.
Wow.
As of the stroke of midnight in 1972, advertising cigarettes on television was illegal. They still used to allow cigars, though, and pipes. That all went away in the late 70s or early 80s when they outlawed all that. And as we've discussed before, thanks to Harry Carey, you can't drink a beer in a television commercial. You can't consume an alcoholic drink in an alcohol commercial, although you can still advertise, of course, with alcohol on television. So anyway, I went to the Magnificent Seven at the Bob Hope. Spectacular theater. 2,042 seats. A kind of a 3-tiered theater. The seats are red velvet. The seats are, the siding and the molding of the seats is very ornate. Of course, it's got spectacular chandeliers and beautiful molding inside. There's murals and friezes painted all over the inside. And it's just a spectacular thing. I think about 75 people were there. To see such a huge, beautiful theater with such a small crowd. So, I mentioned this because I said we're going to talk about upcoming events, but we haven't really talked about the Bob Hope Classic Movies here at all. We've talked about the stock market, and there's one of those coming up. We've talked about other events. We've talked about the Voice of Stockton events and various things like the Bedford Block and the function, all these things. We're not doing the function at the current time, right?
No, it's on hiatus right now.
But we're going to bring something like that back.
Yes.
Okay, so anyway, getting back to the classic movies at the Bob Hope. Instead of giving up and crying and wringing their hands, they decided to just gamble it all, and they're going after the big movie. They're going to show the original Star Wars on July 14th. So we're going to market everywhere I can go. We're going to market the heck out of the fact that the original Star Wars is coming to the Bob Hope Fox Theater. Now, what I started to say about the screen didn't finish it. The Magnificent Seven was in CinemaScope. There was 2 widescreen formats that were very well known, and they came out in the 50s to combat the original days of the early days of television. The first thing movie theaters did was say, let's make the screen bigger. Well, first of all, they also went color. Half your movies in the 40s were color and half were black and white. But when the 50s came around and television came out, most movies became color. Now, there were still some black and whites into the early 60s, but by about 65, 66, that was pretty much all movies were color. But the Magnificent Seven was also CinemaScope. Now, I don't think I believe I'd seen a CinemaScope movie before at the Bob Hope Fox Theater. It took up the entire width. I did not know the screen was that big inside that theater. When you open the curtains, and if you've been inside there, right, and you've seen the stage and everything, this screen is as wide as the entire stage. The whole framework where the curtains are is the CinemaScope size screen. It was just huge. Now, in the Magnificent Seven, you have Yul Brynner, Steve McQueen, Charles Bronson, Robert Vaughn, and a bunch, Eli Wallach, and a bunch of other people I can't even remember the name. So anyway, and they have a pretty good sound system in there too. So it's almost like having surround sound. By the way, there are no screens this big in the Cineplex. The Cineplex that Stockton has is a wonderful movie theater. And they have great movies in there, but they do not have a screen as big as the Bob Hope. Because they're projecting it from a longer distance in a bigger building so the screen can be larger. So, Star Wars is coming on Sunday, July 14th. And RTD is going to try and arrange shuttle with our new RTD Van Gogh service. We're going to try and create some shuttles to help seniors get there who've never probably been able to go before.
How's that doing via seniors, by the way?
What's that?
Van Gogh, how's the ridership for
As
seniors?
far as I know, it's doing really well. I haven't had a chance to see any actual specific numbers. It's not a project that I specifically, personally have worked on. But actually, I should have, maybe by the next time I do this show, we may actually have some numbers. And we're going to do a big RTD special here pretty soon, along with our also long-promised, vaunted transportation special. And I am going to talk about transportation a little bit today. But anyway, Van Gogh has a chance to do really well. And people love the fact that buses are painted like Van Gogh paintings.
How did you guys come up with that concept? Or who came up with that concept?
Our marketing guy, Talia Williams, was absolutely brilliant. He thought, well, they had to have a name. These are not vans, really. They're actually small shuttle buses. But they seat 9 people, which is about the same capacity as a van. So they're kind of, even though the buses are bigger and nicer than that, they're sort of thought of as vans. They're thinking, well, you can go places, you can go on the van. All of a sudden, they came up with Van Gogh. And then this guy remembered, and of course, you had the spectacular painter named Van Gogh. And one thing led to another, and it led to a whole marketing campaign, and then they painted the buses. They had to get special copyright approval. Those are actually RTD original designs, but they're designed to look like a Van Gogh painting, and they did have to get permission. They had to make sure they weren't infringing on copyrights. That's what I'm trying to say.
So you're gonna dress up as a
Oh, I'm not gonna.
Jedi?
I just don't dress up. That's just not my thing.
Gonna cosplay, Nate?
This is about as flamboyant as I get right here with my RTD Stockton.
No Darth Vader?
Huh?
No Darth Vader outfit?
No, not for me. But I know most of my family, though, my younger family, I should say, and my extended family, are all big Star Wars people. So I'm going to make sure they all know about it. We'll try to get them there. By the way, the Bob Hope Classic Movie is a great deal. It's $4 for seniors and $8 for adults. But you get free beverages and snacks when you go in there. That's just included. And they ask for a donation, but So for $8, you're getting sodas or wine and little bags or boxes of cookies and chips, all free, plus the movie. By the way, they always show a couple cartoons, one or two really great cartoons from like Merry Melodies or whatever the other one was called by Warner Brothers primarily. They used to show newsreels, but they haven't done that much lately. I won't describe today what a newsreel is. We'll save that for. We'll talk about the Bob Hope again more. With that, I think we can transition to sports. I didn't want to say it at the beginning because I knew we'd get distracted and never get back to all this other talk about gentrification activities and everything. But I just can't. I just can't let it go. I mean, the Warriors are on the verge of another NBA championship here, and this one has not been easy in coming.
Let's go Raptors! Woo.
And I know you were rooting for the Portland Blazers. Yeah. Portland. I do want to give Portland some credit that I don't think people are giving them, even though the Warriors actually, in effect, swept them with 4 straight wins. I thought Portland was better, and I thought they played better than Houston, even though Houston went to 6 games. And furthermore, Portland's a much better team than the Clippers. By the way, the Clippers deserve some special credit too, though. There aren't that many teams that can get 2 wins out of the Warriors, let alone a lower-ranked, lower-seeded team. I think they were the 8th seed, if I remember right. Because the Warriors had the best record in the Western Conference. So the Clippers were the 8th seed, and they pulled off that historic win in Oakland where they came from 31 points down in the second half to win. And then they came from 26 or 7 down in another game in Oakland to win. I think they are the only team the Warriors have played in the past. No, I'm sorry, Cleveland. When Cleveland won the NBA title with LeBron James, they won 2 consecutive playoff games in Oakland. That's right, because they won game 5 and 7 there. But the NBA champion Cleveland Cavaliers and this year's 8th-seeded LA Clippers are the only teams to have ever beaten the Warriors twice on the Oakland Coliseum floor. In fact, the Warriors, I think, have only lost 4 home playoff games in this entire stretch. I think it's 5. And they lost one to Memphis, and I forgot they lost one to Oklahoma City, and I forgot the other one. But it's just remarkable. Now, I don't think the Warriors have won this thing either. I'm not sitting here gloating overconfidently. First of all, Toronto's a very excellent team. It is fair to say that Kawhi Leonard, who's had a pretty good series, is also partially injured. He has a little bit of a bad leg.
Yeah, he's a little calf.
Yeah, so I know he's not quite 100%. And I know he was the one that got famously injured when they were in the Western Conference Finals against San Antonio, I don't know, 3 years ago or 2 years ago, when they were beating the Warriors by 20-something plus points in the first game of the series in Oakland, and Zaza Pachulia got his feet underneath his feet, and he fell, sprained his ankle, missed the whole rest of the series, and they said that San Antonio would have beat the Warriors. I don't know if San Antonio would have beat the Warriors, but it probably would have been a much tougher series for the Warriors if Kawhi Leonard had been able to play that entire series. And Kawhi Leonard seems to be a class act. I've not heard him complain really about or talk about revenge or anything like that.
Report from Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN: Kevon Looney out indefinitely after suffering a fracture last night on his collarbone.
Yeah, because what happened to him, the fall didn't look all that terrible, but I think he landed with all of his weight on the shoulder blade. So, yeah, and that's the next thing I was just going to say, by the way. I know people think the Warriors just steamroll over everybody. It kind of looks that way, and it's real easy for them. But they had a lot of injuries
They
this
were
year.
lucky last night at the end of the game. The Raptors they had a bad third quarter, but at the end of the fourth quarter, they were playing a lot better.
Well, yeah, the Raptors actually probably should have won last night, but the Warriors have a way. I've talked about this for years before. A really great team with a great winning pedigree gets into the mind of the other team. And sometimes a team partially wins on reputation. And the Warriors have been able to successfully pull that off in that they are so dramatic in how they come out with these big runs. The game that, we all know they started the third quarter with an 18-0 run, which is almost unbelievable for an NBA team to be outscored 18-0. But it goes farther than that. If you go back to the end of the second quarter, it was a 24-1 run. The Warriors scored 24 points to the Raptors 1. The Raptors were up 58-48 with I think just a little over 2 minutes to go in the second quarter. And by the 5-minute mark of the third quarter, the Warriors were up 76-59 or something. I don't even remember now, but it's just remarkable the turnaround they had. But it did start 18-0 in the second half. What I was going to say about that was when the Raptors did manage to get caught back up, sort of. They never did catch them again, but they got it within 2. They got it within 5 one time, then they got it within 4 another time, and then they got it within 2 another time.
And they were playing that box and one defense.
Yeah, but every time the Raptors got close, the Warriors would either make a great defensive stop or the Raptors would miss an open shot, basically. And the Warriors in the fourth quarter cleaned up the boards. DeMarcus Cousins had an amazing game for a guy who's barely played for a year and a half, and in the NBA final game, and it's really his first chance ever really to play any kind of real serious minutes in a serious playoff game. He was, and not being in probably that great a shape, he was spectacular, in my opinion.
Yes.
His passing was amazing, and his rebounding was amazing. But anyway, here's what I really wanted to talk about with the Warriors. First of all, in my personal humble opinion, and I'm old enough to remember the Celtics from their first dynasty with Bill Russell and Sharman and Bob Cousy. I'm just old enough to remember the end of that dynasty. And we're going to describe it a little bit here because we're going to compare the Warriors to it. And I also want to mention, I was going to transition saying because I'm leading up to a major point about seasons here. High school seasons are way too long, in my opinion. The days when you used to have it used to be famous that the big stud dude on campus was a 3-letterman sport. Oh yeah, he played football, basketball, and baseball. Not possible anymore. Football season goes into, if you're a good football team and you win your league or your conference, then you go to playoffs, and if you win the playoffs, you go to state championships. Next thing you know, you're playing a football game in December. And the high school basketball season starts in November. And then you have Christmas holiday. Next thing you know, a person might be able to transition for the second half of the season. And in college, it's even worse. And college teams, I don't even think they let players play the other sport much anymore.
No, not
They
really.
pretty much force them to be football, baseball, basketball, or whatever, because they don't want them getting injured in the other sport. I just happened to read that Larry Bird played one game of baseball. He went 1 for 2 and got 2 RBIs. And probably the basketball team said, no more baseball, Larry. We're not going to have you get beaned by a pitch or, foul it off your foot or something.
Yeah, French lick.
So he played one game for Indiana State in baseball. But anyway,
Indiana State, this was.
So I was going to say the college seasons are too long. Now, on a completely separate note, and not to criticize the length of anything, that's not the point here. I also mentioned we have the big Summer Lions football game coming up on June 15th.
I'll be part of the broadcast.
Oh, are you going to be doing PA or radio or?
No, we're going to be streaming it live on Facebook Live. So, Lions game will be on there, and we'll have some guests during the broadcast. So it's going to kind of be like a show slash play-by-play here and there. Interview some guests.
And that's the North versus the South.
Yep.
Where do they define the North and South for that game?
I believe the North is Stockton for this district, all the way to, I want to say, it goes all the way from east to Mountain House, all the way to.
This is
Calaveras
just San Joaquin County?
No, this is San Joaquin County, Calaveras County, Amador County.
Okay.
Then the south, is I believe Modesto, Turlock.
Okay, is it the Sac Joaquin district more or less?
Yeah.
Okay, that's. And I forgot what the tradition had been, or the trend has been lately. Who's been winning more?
The South has been winning more.
Okay, that's what I kind of thought. Okay, and it used to be played at UOP, of course.
Yes.
Until they tore down Stagg Memorial Stadium.
2011, right?
And now they've used what is now called A.G. Spano Stadium, which is actually the Lincoln High School.
It's going to be back at Lincoln the first time since I believe 2011.
Well, that's right. This is the first time at Stockton in 5 years or something.
Yeah,
like
it was in Tracy the last 4 years.
Yeah, and I guess they're playing at Schmidt Field or whatever that one's called, and.
Wayne Schneider Stadium.
Wayne Schneider, that's right. Gus Schmidt is in Manteca. Wayne Schneider is in Tracy. Okay. So anyway, I did want to mention that game, and I was going to mention high school sports. It's way too long.
One of the best venues in the state. Some people think AG Spanos for high school games.
Okay. So, having said that, I'm going to transition now back to the Warriors because I'm going to do a comparison. I'm not sure how many people have made this comparison yet. Because I'm a Warriors fan from a little kid, so this is obvious. And we suffered through, 28 years of just dreary, awful basketball. They had that awful W logo.
They had some good years in the 90s.
The ugly masked W logo that looked like some weird dead creature that got lost in outer space.
They had some good years in the 90s.
They had a couple here and there. And they had the one Warriors team that knocked off the Dallas Mavericks or whatever.
Yeah, Run TMC also.
Right, and they had another team that stunned somebody else one year. But around that was about 30 years of total mediocrity and futility, and being near last place all the time.
Latrell Sprewell choking PJ
Yes,
Carlson.
Latrell Sprewell's choking the coach, and terrible draft picks, and lousy trades, and bad luck with injuries. One of those teams that won was Baron Davis, I want to say.
Yeah, it was 2008. Don Nelson was also the coach there.
And then you had the famous game way back when, what's his name, Sleepy Floyd scored 27 points against the Lakers in the fourth quarter or whatever.
All of a sudden, people are fans of the Warriors.
So, the Warriors have reached a point now where they do rightfully have the right, they've earned the right to correctly, is what I'm trying to say, now be judged against the great dynasties in the history of the NBA. So you start off with the Boston Celtics. Okay, they made it to 10 consecutive NBA finals. The only thing close to that was that the Cleveland Browns went to 9 straight NFL title games. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. That's not quite right. They had 4 straight AAFC title games. Then when that league folded and the Browns were absorbed into the NFL, they went to 5 straight NFL title games. And Otto Graham was the quarterback in all of them. But I also have to qualify that. Those teams had 12 and 14 game schedules, and they had no playoffs in those days. You won the conference and you went to the NFL title game. You didn't have to survive 2 or 3 playoff games. And this is a major point I'm going to make here in a moment. Now, so getting back to it, the Celtics went to 10 straight NBA finals, which is an unheard of thing. And the only thing that came close was the Cleveland Browns, and the Montreal Canadiens also had a stretch of going to the Stanley Cup finals 5 or 6 times in a row. And that's back when the NHL only had 6 teams and 4 teams made the playoffs. But anyway, I did some research on the Celtics, though. The first 6 years of that run, they only had to win 1 playoff series. You had the Western Division, Eastern Division would win. If they won their division, they played each other in a best-of-7 series. That was it. Actually, it was best of 5 for a while, but by the time the Celtics got there, I think that one was a best-of-7. So, for 6 of the 10 years, the first 6, they only had to win 1 playoff series, and they were in the NBA Finals. Then, the next 2 years, they had to win 2 playoff rounds, and then the NBA Finals was the 3rd round. Then the last 2 years of the stretch, I think they had to play 3 rounds, but the first round was best of 5 or something like that. Now, also, in that era, when the Celtics started that, they were only playing about 70 games in a regular season. And since about 1970 or so, it's been an 82-game schedule or something like that. Okay, so I did all kinds of mathematics on this, and what I came up with is for the Celtics to get to the NBA Finals 10 years in a row, they had to win 62 games in 10 years. So to get to the finals over that 10-year stretch, now the first 4 years they only had to win 4 games to get to the NBA Finals, but for the whole stretch of it, they won 62 in 10 years. So Celtics had to win 6.2 games on average per year in the playoffs, basically with 2 rounds for about half of it, to get to the NBA Finals. You know what the Warriors have had to do to get to 5 straight NBA Finals? By the way, other than the Celtics, they are the only other team. The Showtime Lakers and the Michael Jordan Bulls did not get to 5 straight NBA Finals. The Warriors are the only other team that's done that in the history after the Celtics 10 consecutive.
Yeah, Michael decided to take a couple years off.
Right. The Bulls might have done more if he hadn't retired, but the fact is he did. And also they had, in their early days, they lost some tough playoff series too.
The Pistons.
They lost the Pistons and the Celtics or something like that. So, but anyway, getting back to, but everything is what it is. You can't change the structure of what it was at one time or who did what. So getting back to my greater point, for the Warriors to have made it to 5 consecutive NBA Finals, all 5 years, they had to win each year 3 playoff series to get to the finals. And those were all best of 7. And unlike other sports like football or some other sport, they don't get a first round bye or anything. The NBA should consider a first round bye, but of course this is all greed anyway. They want the television money and everything. That's what drives all this. For the Warriors to get to the NBA Finals in 5 seasons, they had to win 62 games. For the Celtics to get there, the Celtics had to win 62 games in 10 years. For the Warriors to get to the NBA Finals in 5 years, they had to win 60 playoff games. So the Warriors have had to do about the same amount of work compressed into 5 years that the Celtics did for 10 years. Now, that's not to take it away from the Celtics, because they still had to be good 10 years in a row. And they obviously had some injuries and stuff, I'm sure. And I've had people argue the other side of this. Oh, but the NBA was much smaller than less teams, so they were playing against much better talent. It wasn't as watered down by the number of teams and all that. Well, I'd buy that to a point, except the population is twice as big now too. So, long story short, for the Celtics to win the NBA title and get to 10, they won 8 of those, by the way, out of the 10. They had to have roughly 85 wins a year. The Warriors, to do what they've done in 5 years, have had to win about 98 games a year, roughly speaking. And I didn't really do all the math of the regular seasons. The Warriors actually had better records in the regular seasons than the Celtics did collectively during that time. So I think it's pretty remarkable. Plus, the season goes from October to June. When the Celtics were winning their NBA titles, they were in late April, early May. When the Warriors swept the Washington Bullets in 1975, that actually was called 8 days in May. And it ended on May 12th. The Warriors won the 1975 NBA title on May 12th. Today is June 2nd, and they're about to play the third game. So it's a much longer, tougher season. So mentally speaking, I think it's much, much tougher for a team to be able to repeat or continue consecutive years of success now than it was then, relatively speaking.
You forgot the late great John Havlicek on those great.
Well, we'll get to, we'll have probably one more show. We'll talk about the Warriors, because the series will be over by the time we come back.
Oh, wow.
I will be on vacation next week, so I forgot to tell everyone, tonight's show is aired on June 3rd. We'll be back on June 17th.
Well, have a great vacation, Nate, and we'll see you back
Going
then.
by train to Bend, Oregon.
Ooh, fun.
We'll talk about that, too.
So until next time, this has been Stockton Alive on the voice of Stockton and the voice of Sam Joaquin.